Morning. I'd like to call the meeting to order. And I'd like to start by everybody introducing themselves and start with the NDP Caucus.
Jim Boudreau, MLA for Guys for Sheet Harbour, sitting in for MLA Ramey.
Matt Wynot, MLA Hammonds Plains Upper Sackville.
Brian Scabar, member for Cumberland North.
I'm Gary Burrell. I represent Colchester, Muscatawbet Valley.
Good morning and welcome. Howard Epstein, MLA for Halifax, Chebucto.
Andrew Younger, Dartmouth East.
Chris D'Entremont, Argyle, sitting in for MLA Porter.
Terry Spicer, Assistant Auditor General.
Darlene Henry, Committee Clerk.
Jane Fraser, Acting Deputy Minister, Transportation Infrastructure Renewal.
Bruce Fitzner, Chief Engineer, Department of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal.
Brem Pirro, Acting Executive Director of Finance, Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Keith Caldwell, Chair. First of all, I'd like to the presenters from the Department of Transportation to make their presentation, if they would.
Certainly. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this morning, and I hope you'll find that our time with you is informative. I'll keep my introductory remarks very brief so that there's ample time for questions today. Before I start my opening remarks, we have introduced Mr. Bruce Fitzner, who is the Chief Highway Engineer, and Brent Perot, who is the Acting Executive Director of Finance for the department. The three of us are very pleased to be here this morning to talk to you about our chip sealing operation, our mobile asphalt plant, as well as the RIM program. We hope that the information package we provided you is helpful, and we look forward to your questions today. I would like to give you a very brief outline of the department before we start, to give you a sense of the size of the department. The mission of the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal is very simple. It's to deliver quality public infrastructure. The way that we do that is through two main operational divisions. We have the highway side as well as the public works division in the department. We have 2,200 FTEs that work all across the province. Our clients are Nova Scotians, other government departments, as well as agencies of the Crown. We oversee the construction of provincial highways. We maintain and manage the provincial transportation system. As a service department to government, our department offers a full range of services, including project management of buildings, building operations, environmental remediation, land acquisition, and of course, construction. We're responsible for 2,400 buildings with an assessed value of about $1.9 billion. We maintain 4,100 bridges and about 23,000 kilometers of provincial roads. We operate and maintain approximately 1,300 pieces of equipment, as well as 7 ferries. Both the chip seal operation and the asphalt plant are new programs that we've introduced to help ensure that we're investing taxpayers' dollars wisely while continuing to provide Nova Scotians with safe roads. The RIM program was introduced in 2000-2001 and has been very successful in maintaining our rural and secondary roads. The information we provided to you today include updated versions of the business case for both the chip seal operation as well as the asphalt plant. When these business cases were originally published in 2010, there was some information that we had to redact under Freedom of Information. That pertain primarily to such things as privacy concerns for contractors, as well as budget information and contract negotiations that were ongoing with CUPE at the time. Most of that information has been put in the business cases. However, there are some things that have been redacted. I want to point out that those are the only changes that have been made to the business cases. We look forward today to talk to you about the chip seal operation and the results to date. I'm pleased to say that so far we've saved more than $2 million by introducing the chip seal operation. We've seen tender prices from the private sector go down from $91,000 per kilometre for double chip seal to about $40,000 per kilometre. Our job is to ensure that we spend taxpayers' dollars wisely while continuing to provide Nova Scotians with safe roads. We are moving forward this summer with our mobile asphalt plant. This initiative is another example of steps we're taking to get as much work done as we can within the budget allocation. We've committed to evaluating both of these initiatives and will be pleased to share those results with you. Our RIM program is another area that we're here to discuss this morning. As I stated, it was originally established in 2000-2001 and is used primarily for the funding and maintenance of local roads and secondary roads. To date, there's been a total of $179 million spent on the RIM program over a 12-year history. That's a significant amount of funding, and it speaks to the extent as well as the expense of maintaining our road system. Examples of some of the work that's carried out under the RIM program are things like gravel patching, asphalt patching, ditching, guardrails, things of that nature. Projects carried out under RIM tend to be smaller and aren't usually the type of work that you would see on our capital program. We look forward to answering your questions, and certainly if there's any questions that you have for us today that we're unable to answer, we will commit to get that information to you as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll start a question with Mr. Younger.
Thank
20
you.
minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And first, I just wanted to raise an issue. The acting deputy had mentioned that we were provided with an updated business case, but in discussion with my Progressive Conservative colleague, neither one of us have received that. So I don't know if that's still working its way to us in committee or what the case may be, but...
maybe I can ask the clerk, did you receive that?
Everything that was sent out to you, so I'm not sure.
Okay.
They
Well,
said it was sent.
my understanding is it really hasn't changed much other than a couple of redactions, but maybe we can still obviously proceed with this, with it, but it would be good to receive that. I think we've checked with our researchers and they're not aware of it coming through either, so.
Perhaps I could ask the Deputy Minister to ensure that we do have that information in each caucus.
Yeah, or the clerk, whichever place it ended up. All right. I want to start, there's a number of issues I want to cover, and no doubt I won't cover them all in 20 minutes, so I'm sure I'll be back. You said, quote here, investing taxpayers' dollars wisely, and then you talked about saving the tender price going from $91,000 per kilometer to $40,000 per kilometer, and that you saved $2 million. But I want to ask you about that, because that seems to be far different from other information that's out there. And let me just explain that. The tender prices that are being quoted as a before tender price were abnormally high across Canada because of the infrastructure money being put in as part of the stimulus plan. And that's fairly widely accepted and widely known. Even the federal government has actually acknowledged that. Bank of Canada has acknowledged that. That prices for many products that governments tend to buy actually went up during that period. It's also widely known and accepted, if we look at other provinces, that the tender prices have come down in the past year for a lot of reasons where they haven't built government asphalt plants by similar margins, largely because of, in the case of Nova Scotia, for example, we have another big competitor in the field that was coming in. And as well, we know that there was less work out there generally, so there wasn't a capacity issue. So there was more companies going for less work after that stimulus ended. There were two approaches, and I'm going to simplify this, but there's two approaches. One was the approach this government took, which was to go and buy an asphalt plant and start going at it and building, doing its own chip sealing, at least some of it. I realize you still tender some of it. The second approach, which was done by others in this province, and I'll use HRM as an example, since that would probably be the second biggest tenderer of road work, was to go to the companies and say, listen, your tender prices are too high. What would it take to bring those down? And they achieved the same reductions that the Nova Scotia government did, more in some cases, than what you're suggesting. And they did that because they went and they had a meeting and they said, what's the problem? And some of it was around tendering times, some of it was around bulk tendering, and those same things have been done in New Brunswick and achieved in New Brunswick to reduce the price there. So I guess what I'd like to know is why wasn't that step taken first? Before deciding to put the province on the line of a significant capital investment and long-term liability, instead of first having those discussions with the industry to see if there were other ways to bring the tender price down.
Ms. Fraser?
Thank you very much for the question, MLA Younger. The tender prices that we saw for double chip seal across the province from 2008 and 2009 are an actual reflection of what we were seeing. So that was $91,000 per kilometer. The industry, there was limited competitive competition. There's really two contractors that provide double chip seal for in the province of Nova Scotia. When you look at what New Brunswick was receiving for similar work when they tendered it, so not their in-house operation, but the work that they did when they tendered it, it was $37,000 per kilometer. So it was really the lack of competition that we were seeing that made the decision to go into chip seal. The benefits of the chip seal plant are, certainly being able to do more paving, more work with the same amount of money. And we're seeing that in the prices that have been experienced in 2011. They've dropped by more than half. So we are seeing that. We believe that is a direct result of the competition of having our own crews in place. There's other benefits from having the province be involved in chip seal. One is simply the use of our equipment. And a lot of the equipment that we use for the chip seal operation are equipment that would be is used primarily for winter work, so it would be idle during the summer. So we can utilize that, which results in savings as well. It also, by having that competitive tension between the private contractors and the in-house work that we do, it helps inform us to make sure that we are getting good pricing. So it really does assist in the area of being an informed consumer, if you will.
Mr. Younger?
Well, Mr. Chair, there is no competition between the province and the private sector because the province isn't bidding on the tenders against the private sector. So there is no healthy competition between. It'd be one thing if the department was submitting a bid on the tender at the same time, but that, just to say we're going to do these 300 kilometers of roads or whatever number of kilometers, that isn't competition. I think actually it's interesting because your comment about New Brunswick, I think, proved my point. You were saying they were getting $37,000, a price of $37,000 a kilometer. But when you look at the facts and you talk to the New Brunswick department, they actually tendered them differently. They met with the industry and found out that, okay, well, if we give you, we'll tender them in packages, we'll tender them, so there's a group of roads as opposed to single roads, which will always cost more, but Nova Scotia was largely tendering it by single roads. We know that in New Brunswick, some of the contracts were for multi-year maintenance. That was not being done here, which also brought down the price. And we also know that additional competition came into the Nova Scotia market in the exact same year that the provincial asphalt plant started. And so that would have brought down prices anyway. So I guess it really gets back to that question of why didn't you look at those options before taking on a liability for the province of Nova Scotia? Because any asset, whether it's a good asset or a bad asset, it's still a liability to the province. It either has to be replaced or maintained at some point. The winter works equipment, which you talked about, it's great that it's being used in the summer. However, now it reduces the lifespan of that equipment. So there's a liability on that side. So I guess it really comes back to that question, why didn't you have that discussion with the industry first? And if that didn't work out, then look at the option of a paving plan.
Ms. Fraser?
On the issue of competition, the two contractors that were bidding on the jobs in 2008 and 2009 at the price that we were receiving at that time are the same two contractors that are bidding on the work that we're having today. So in this specific area of chip seal, what we're seeing are the same two contractors. On the issue of the tendering and the way that New Brunswick puts its tender package out, the benefits of doing multi-year tendering or looking at the size of the job and the location of the job, I think that really is a technical question that I think the Chief Highway Engineer would certainly be able to give a much more fulsome answer than I would be able to.
Mr. Fitzner.
Thank you. I think to get back to our previous discussions that we have had, a long-term working relationship with the road building industry. We meet with them annually on many occasions, discussing everything from tender prices to specifications for the jobs and that type of thing. Prior to us moving towards our own operations for chip seal and asphalt, we had a lot of discussions about how we can reduce tender pricing, and that's almost an ongoing thing. And things like early tendering and the way we put our tenders together and the packaging of the tender are things that we've done. We've brought in electronic tendering system in Nova Scotia so that we could get more bids in more easily for the contractors. So we did have that discussion, and I know at the start of the stimulus program, you said prices went up everywhere in the country, and I don't know what you're referring to there specifically. I didn't have that information, but I know I meet with my colleagues around the country on an annual basis in other departments of transportation, and in that initial year of the stimulus, what they were experiencing, telling me, was some of the best pricing that they'd ever seen. And then the reason being was, I think, the economy at the same time, and the reason for the stimulus was because the economy was moving downward, and so what they were finding were companies that hadn't been previously involved necessarily in road building, where the private sector investments were less, were moving into the government road building type of contracts. And so for initially that first year, they were seeing good pricing, and here we were seeing it actually go the other way. And so we started to ask ourselves the question, what's going on, or what's different here? Now, we always recognize that there's areas of the province that there's not as many bidders, and then we've always found that when you get into those areas, you're going to see higher pricing than more strongly competitive areas, and that's natural. That's almost a given, right? But it was just getting to the point that in those areas of the province, we weren't able to get as much work done for the dollar that we were spending, so we were just trying to find a way. We had discussions individually, myself and the former, my former chief engineer that was here, had talked to people, and we told them that we were very concerned what was happening and that they needed to find some ways to deal with that issue within their own association, but we weren't seeing any changes, and so that's when we made the decision that we needed to introduce something else into the mix to see if we could achieve that objective.
Mr. Younger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, it's interesting that your own minister said, and someone can go to Hansard and get the exact quote if it's required, Mr. Chair, repeatedly in question period, that he knew that the industry could do it cheaper. His concern was that they weren't, than what the province was doing it. And he all but admitted in a number of those questions, and that really those discussions in a big way didn't happen the way that they happened in some of our municipalities, where they did actually achieve getting those lower prices. And in fact, the industry has said that too, so it seems to be lots of people saying that the necessary discussion didn't happen. What I'd be interested to know is, if I had a chip sealing company, which I don't for the record, but if I did, I would have to factor into my price not only my product, but my labor, the overtime, the cost of transportation, the amortization, the overhead costs, all the administrative costs into that price. What is the government's price per kilometer to do chip sealing, including all of those costs?
Ms. Fraser.
based on the actual experience that we've had with double chip sealing, looking at the things that you've included, such things as the materials, so emulsion, all the various components that go into chip seal, labor, amortization of the equipment. The experience that we saw in 2011, 2012 is $49,000 per kilometer.
Mr. Younger?
Thank you. Does that also include pension liabilities for those employees?
Ms. Fraser?
That would be the full suite of employee benefits, as well as their labor costs, lodging costs, everything that would be part of the cost of having our employees working. Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Younger?
Sorry, Mr. Chair. So even with that number at 49, you are now, according to the numbers you gave in your presentation, where you said that it has come down to $40,000 per kilometer per tender, you're now $9,000 per kilometer higher than the private sector, and you are $12,000 per kilometer higher than New Brunswick. So you really haven't solved the problem.
Ms. Fraser?
I would say that we have never said that we can do chip seal cheaper than the private industry. What we have said consistently, and what I believe the minister has said, is that we can do it cheaper than the tender prices that we were seeing, and we've experienced that. It was $91,000 per kilometer for double chip seal prior to our crew being up and running in 2011, 2012. We've demonstrated savings of $2.2 million in 11-12, and that has come from two areas. One is the significant decrease from the private contractors per kilometer from 91,000 down to around 40, which is very encouraging and very good. And the other is the amount of work that our crew is able to do at $49,000 actual cost based on the experience that we had. So we've seen the savings that we hope to by getting into the chip seal business.
Mr. Younger?
Well, Mr. Chair, my argument would be that had you had the appropriate conversations and had you done some of the things that the industry suggested, and listen, when this was announced, the industry said, many in the industry stood up and said, listen, well, here's a whole lot of things that would have reduced that cost to what New Brunswick was paying, or very close, and you're seeing that that's happened now. I mean, the industry's within $3,000 a kilometer of New Brunswick. And yet, instead of taking those options, which also would have resulted in that reduction, and would have resulted in that reduction for all kilometers, we are now in a situation where the government now owns plants that are a long-term liability. They're paying $9,000 a kilometer more than the private sector is bidding now. They're paying $9,000 more than what the private sector said it could bid if it worked with the province to solve this. And it really gets back to the issue of the numbers, your own numbers. I mean, I could sit here and argue, well, somebody else says it's this number and that, but I won't. I'll just use your numbers. Your own department's numbers suggest that had you had the conversation with industry the way the industry suggests that you didn't, we actually would have been saving more money than we are now and getting just as many roads, if not more. You either would have been saving money in the department or you would have get more roads done because you would have been paying $40,000 a kilometer for it all instead of $40,000 for some and $49,000 for some in a hybrid. And so it comes back to that issue of, we know that other jurisdictions, other provinces, municipalities in this very province had those discussions with industry and brought down prices in this province and did not go out and buy plants. It didn't happen here. And so the question is, why didn't you look at that option? And then if that didn't work, say, fine, we have to go and do this.
Ms. Fraser?
You know, certainly the chief highway engineer explained the process that we went through. We have regular discussions with the Road Builders Association. We have a good relationship with them. They're very important to us in being able to deliver on the capital program that we want to, and as well, we are an important client for them. So our relationship with Road Builders is strong. And we do have those discussions with road builders on a fairly regular basis, both myself and certainly Bruce and the staff that work with him. So we do have those conversations about how we can improve tendering prices, how we can change our processes to make sure that we're getting information out there to make it more effective for them to bid. So we do have those discussions on a regular basis, and we're always open to improving the way that we do our business to get a better price and to strengthen the relationship with the road builders. Having said that, you know, the price that we were seeing, it wasn't reflective of what other areas were seeing. And the decision to get into the chip seal business really wasn't one that was taken lightly or was made overnight. We looked at a lot of information. We had discussions. We looked at options in order to reduce the cost of chip sealing. So the decision was made based on a history of what we were seeing, and you know, the ability for us to, given the budget resources that we have, what's the most effective way for us to ensure that we can do more kilometers within that budget allocation. We're very pleased to see the savings, certainly from the private industry, and seeing that their tender prices have come down. That's really, that's resulted in, you know, around almost $600,000 in savings just in 11-12 alone. Coupled with the work that our crew was able to do, we have seen the savings that we were looking for. There's the other benefits that I've spoken about, is more effective use of our equipment to make sure that that's being utilized effectively as possible. The knowledge of being able to be an informed consumer, and to make sure that the prices that we're getting in the future, we can evaluate that and just make sure that we are getting good value. This model of a mix of in-house work and private has been very effective, both for the province of Nova Scotia as well as other jurisdictions. If you look at our central line paint crew, which is a model that we've had for a number of years, using both private contractors as well as our own crews, we have the lowest paint prices in the country, and that's as a result of the competitive tension. So it's an ability to make sure that we can gauge ourselves against the industry. So those are some of the things, and I don't know if the Chief Highway Engineer has anything to add to that answer.
Order, please. Order, please. Your time has expired. Mr. D'Entremont.
Thank you very much. I don't know, maybe if it's a short answer, I'll allow the time to answer that specific question for the member.
I just, one of the reasons I guess that we were looking at the chip seal was because we were looking at a different strategy to manage the local road deficiencies that we had. Everybody's quite aware of those. And we were looking to New Brunswick. They used a chip seal extensively, and we looked at their prices. And the model that they use in New Brunswick, in fact, is where they have a mix of in-house chip seal crews and private sector service providers as well. So that was a model that we saw working well, that they were getting better prices, and one that we went up and explored a little bit further.
Mr. D'Entremont.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank members for being here today. Acting Deputy Minister Jane Fraser, Bruce, good to see you. Chief Engineer, of course, and Brent, thank you for coming in today to take answers. And we know, I think, through all this process, as we're trying to justify the province going out and purchasing an asphalt plant and a chip seal plant and all those things, I think there's a lot of questions, I think, that we have, especially when we believe, you know, from our benches, is that you were asked to do something from either cabinet or from the Premier's office, and you're trying to justify it. And I think you're doing a pretty good job in trying to justify it, but I think in what we've been able to see over the last number of kilometers that have come forward from this, have really raised a whole bunch of new questions, and more specifically from the questions I asked here in the House of Assembly back in December, when it revolved around the location of where the chip seal ended up. So we did a FOI pop, and the FOI pop is, I think, before you now, if we want to start sharing it with you, because it basically precipitated a whole bunch of other questions as we started going through that FOI pop. And really what I'm going to do is I'll draw your attention to specific pages within it and the questions that I have. And I have a number of questions, so I'll just try to ask them as quickly as I can and see if we can get some answers to maybe answering some of these issues. So I want to draw your attention to page 105 in the FOI pop. It's a breakdown of the cost of chip sealing the Monte Vista Road, which is one of the roads that you get done this time. And it was actually to the MLA who lives on the road, John McDonnell. So the first question on that, on page 105, is who precisely prepared the document and approved it before going to the minister?
Ms. Fraser?
When you say approve the document, are you referring to the pricing that's on the sheet?
Specifically, yeah.
Okay. You'll appreciate that I haven't had a chance to review this. I would expect that this was done in response to a request for pricing. This would be work that we would do in-house with looking at the exact numbers that we would have based on the crew. As far as asking who did it and where it went to the minister, I don't have the answer to that. I'm not sure if the chief highway engineer does.
Mr. Vissner?
This sheet here it was prepared after the work was done. We had asked our superintendent of that group to start to put together the final costings for the program for the summer, and we asked them to do it as a total package, the total cost, and we asked them to also look at individual jobs that were done as well, because it can vary from job to job. The minister would never have seen this document. It was just an internal staff document that we were using, and what the minister would have received would have been an aggregated package of the total cost.
Okay, sure.
Mr. Jamal?
From this document, we can see the cost of chip sealing the 4.7 kilometers of road was $189,826.44. My question is, why wasn't the $150,000 gravel cost included in the figure? The $150,000 figure is found on page 58.
Mr. Vissner? Ms. Fraser?
We don't seem to have page 58. I have 57, and then it goes to 59.
Just hold on a second.
It's out of order. It's out of order.
Okay, it was out of the backside. Okay. And I can provide that across if you want.
Thank you.
Ms. Fraser? Or Ms. Vissner?
It's probably Bruce's answers anyway.
Yeah, what that is, when we did a comparison of the chip seal prices versus the industry's chip seal prices, we were isolating it down to the actual cost of applying the chip seal. Most roads that we do before we do the chip seal, we have to prep them. So we go out and we can do some ditching, we can do some pipe work, we can add some strengthening for gravel and this type of thing. So that gravel, although it was a total cost of improving the road, was not a cost of doing the chip seal. That was done previously by division staff. When it was completed, the chip seal crew came in and did the chip seal work. So that's why it was not included. Yep.
Mr. Jamal?
Salaries and expenses, I think we're just going back to page 150, I'm not sure. 105, I mean. Salaries and expenses are listed at $20,241.26. How many people and how many days or hours does that figure represent?
Mr. Vissner?
I think there's approximately 11 crew on the chip seal crew, and I'll have that checked just to make sure that's clear later. And so the salaries for those people would be included in the cost of that work. Yeah.
So maybe what I can do is ask, as you're preparing some more of these answers, that there's a few more that go with, of course, with that. Is it, how much do they make? Are they hour to salary? Does that include the benefits? Is it the usual Nova Scotia government employees benefits? In each calendar month in 2011, how many days was the crew idle due to weather or other issues? So, I mean, there's a whole bunch of factors, I think, that go in this. While doing the job, and in the days immediately before it and after, how many person days of downtime occurred and what was the full cost of the salaries and benefits. So, I mean, really trying to be really specific on the crew that's providing the service and what it actually provides. And, you know, are the cost of those idle days included in that? Because, you know, if you were a private company, your idle days, of course, would be included in that. You know, do we send them off and do other work, and is that added in? And where do what do crew members do in the off season, and where are they on the idle days? I guess that's just continuation of what I'm saying. And so maybe just some general answers on that one. And
basically, all those questions, the answer, the first ones you had was yes. The costs were all included. On this particular job, they would have just included the cost for the work they did on those particular days they were on the Grand Lake Road. But we had a cost center set up to capture all costs for the crew, which includes downtime and that type of thing. We had a number of rainy days where the crew isn't very productive, but we've captured all those costs and all those, the benefits that they get. They're the same benefits that they would normally get under the QP collective agreement. And so we put them all, instead of trying to break them up into all these different jobs, we wanted to make sure that we captured everything. So we used a single cost center, and everything to do with the crew, from the lunch they ate to the, you know, the travel cost to the benefit cost, were put through that cost center. So we had a total, and then would be subdivided out later to the individual jobs.
Okay.
So yeah, as far as we're concerned, all the costs have been captured.
Okay. And if you can provide some more of that detail to us, because it's not really clear from the document that we had in the FOIPOP that really explains that at all.
And just the other part of your question, what do they do? Most of these, they're seasonal employees that would go back to their home divisions in the winter time and be in the snow and ice control program, many of them. There's the supervisors. There's one supervisor that stays on as a year-round employee that would do the planning for the next year's work and that type of thing. He'd have some administrative duties. The road foreman positions would go back into snow and ice control in the wintertime.
Okay. So really, when it comes to the salaries and benefits of these individuals, the people working for the crew, I mean, they're getting paid 100% as they're on doing the work. I mean, they're basically contracted from a 6-month period to do this service. So considering we've only done about 12% of the roads we were actually booked to do this year, they got paid 100%, we only got 12%. So is that in that actual cost that you provided at the beginning of this of 40, what did you say, 49,000? Which actually,
yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
The 49,000 figure was the cost from the time that the crew began to put chip seal down. There was a prep time for the crew to get up to speed. We had to carry out training and get the equipment prep. I think you'll see in the numbers that we provided that if you include the entire, from the time they came on the first day of the summer until they were finished, that the actual cost for that would have been $52,710 per kilometer. Okay. But those costs would be sort of one-time costs, because next year that crew is already trained and they won't need that extra time to get up to speed. So
okay, so when I do the math, it's just the amounts provided by the department on the summary sheet, not of course the numbers that are added here. So 339,836 and 44 cents divided by 4.7 kilometers, it costs taxpayers at least $72,305.63 to chip seal the Monte Vista Road if you add all the costs in. So is it fair to say when it comes to this particular road, the cost far exceeded the $50,000 kilometer the government said it cost the in-house crew to chip seal?
Ms. Fraser?
The cost that we use per kilometer is based on an average. That's the same as what you would see with the private sector. When we speak about things, it's an average. There's a number of factors that go into to the individual project costs. Certainly, we will get the information for you to be able to address that question. But in the business case, and I do appreciate that it may not have been in your package, but we do, before moving into this area, there were a number of assumptions that were made that would go into determining what the per kilometer price would be. So we did take into account the number of weeks that the crew would be working, the hours per day, the downtime due to either equipment not working appropriately or rain days, and things of that nature. So we did capture a number of those components that you've asked for. And once again, that would be at an aggregate level, and then we would apply that as a per kilometer rate is the way that we would do that.
Okay. Looking through this process or through this package again, there was a consultant brought in to assess the Monte Vista Road, Grand Lake Road. Why did that happen?
Mr.
We have, as many people that have been with the department, the Grand Lake Monte Vista Road has been an issue for some time for us, a maintenance issue. It's important that if you use a chip seal surface, which doesn't have really much intrinsic strength itself, the chip seal, the strength that it gets is from the subbase that you have. So in order to ensure that the chip seal didn't fail, we brought them in and we'd add them to do strength tests on the road to see if it needed some strengthening with gravel before it was chip sealed. And that would be similar to some paving jobs. And as similar to, for instance, we tendered a job down in Shelburne County this year to one of the contractors, and the same process. We did strengthening of that road with gravel before we chip sealed it. So.
Okay. How much did the consultant cost? Or is it a sort of a cross-province kind of consultant?
We would have like a standing offer for a consultant that we would use for this type of thing. We put out tenders every few years, and we bring on a service provider to do that for a number of years. So I don't have the actual figures for that. Those can be provided there for that, the reports that they did for us. Yeah.
Okay, I appreciate that. Also on page 105, there's a line for amortization. What was the amortization for? We couldn't quite figure out whether it was on equipment, whether it was on something else, and which equipment was it? Was it the new chip sealing equipment, or was it more of the equipment that, the graders and things that would have been used during that time?
Ms. Fraser?
It would have been based on the equipment that we would be purchasing for the chip sealing crew, and I think it was about $1.5 million was the actual cost, and we had estimated that originally in the business case to be about 2.6. So we would be using the actual amount, and it would be for heavy equipment. So we would use the provincial amortization rate for as per the tangible capital asset policy. So it would be about a 20%. Once again, that would be blended and based on actual costs.
Specifically on page 105, it talks to $20,241.26. So, so we're just wondering which equipment that was supposed to be. So is that? So we would say that's the fair portion of the paving equipment itself. So, and all the equipment that was being used.
Correct.
Okay. Would it be fair to say that when we add all this stuff up, that once you add in capital costs, gravel, ditching, crew, including the send down times, the consultant, and the actual cost of the chip sealing, something to pay for a fair portion of the machine, the actual cost of chip sealing, the Minister's Road was over $500,000, if we add all this up?
Ms. Fraser?
The costs that we have indicate that the cost of the chip sealing was $189,000. When we calculate this, what we look at are the components that go into the chip seal that we would see reflected in a cost from a private contractor. So the $91,000 per kilometer that we had been seeing from the industry didn't have things like gravel. My understanding is, and certainly the chief highway engineer can correct me if I'm off base, didn't include such things as prep work, which was some of the gravel that you would have seen. So in order to be comparative and to make sure that we are reflecting the costs of both operations, we wouldn't have those costs in the breakdown that we were asked for in providing the per kilometer cost for, or the cost for chip sealing. Do you have anything to add?
Mr. Morris?
The total, I don't have the math done on it, your number, but certainly the total cost of the job was much more than just the chip seal cost. Right. But if it was happened to be $500,000, it was 4 kilometers, so it would be about $125,000 a kilometer for the entire job, if that in fact was a figure. And I guess that was why we were looking to move to chip sealing. If you would pave that road, it would probably be double the cost of that. So we found that, you know, the chip seal, that was one of the reasons that we were moving to it. It was a much more cost-effective alternative to give a hard service to some of these roads.
Mr. D'Entremont?
The Department Business Plan projects 55 kilometers of road would be double chip sealed by the in-house crew, and 311 kilometers would be single chip sealed to the first year. The reality is about 35.9 kilometers Nova Scotian roads got double chip sealed total. Would you agree that despite the press releases from the department, the advent of in-house chip sealing resulted in fewer roads being chip sealed with little or no savings to the taxpayer, especially when the capital costs of the plant are considered?
Ms. Fraser?
The estimate of the number of kilometers that we hope to do with chip sealing was based on a fully on a production year, a fully functioning production year. This year, I mean, it is fair to say that we are disappointed that we weren't able to achieve as much double chip seal as we had originally hoped to be able to do. There's a number of reasons for that. We had bad weather. May and June was very bad, so we weren't able to do chip sealing. There's a number of other activities that can go on, but we couldn't do chip sealing. We also had to train the crew in the proper application of chip sealing and things of that nature, as well as safety training. So the crew really started to work in August, and we were seeing towards the end of the year some days where we were achieving close to the per day chip sealing totals that we had been looking for. So I think it is very fair to say that the first year was a learning year. The upcoming construction season for 12-13, we're certainly looking to definitely improve on that and to benefit from the training and the learning that we had. I do want to point out that even though the total kilometers that we had been hoping to achieve weren't exactly what we had anticipated, we did recognize some significant savings. There's $2.2 million in savings. $600,000 of that is coming from private industry, where the per kilometer prices has decreased significantly, and then as well in the savings that we saw from our crew. So, you know, while the results weren't as per the business case, which is really based on a fully functioning year, we still have good results.
Thank you. Your time has expired. Just before I go to the NDP caucus, I would ask Mr. D'Entremont if you could table that information.
We have, yeah.
Yeah, just to ensure that all committee members.
We don't have the full package? Okay, we'll make sure you have the full package again.
Yes.
Yep.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Mr. Boudreau, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. And thank you to the folks across the way there who have come in to talk about this very important initiative. I come from a riding where there has been very limited work done, completed for a long period of time. So I'm very much aware of the costs, and I think I can easily say that what Mr. Fitzner referred to was something referred to when he spoke about the fact that paving costs were, in some cases, more than double in the area which I represent. So I know that is, was an extremely important consideration for me and for the constituents that live in that area. $2.2 million in savings is a significant amount of money. And I think one of the things that we have to understand is that we're spending money that belongs to the taxpayers. And it's incumbent upon us as members of the Legislative Assembly of the Province of Nova Scotia to ensure that the taxpayers' money is used wisely. I believe, and Mr. Fitchner, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you have already indicated that there were extensive consultations with private industry prior to moving in the direction of purchasing our own chip seal plant and looking to moving forward in the future. Now, am I correct in saying that?
Ms. Fraser?
I guess the specific issue of, you know, we got to see better tender prices, I probably wouldn't describe that as extensive discussions. They were sort of ongoing discussions that were held in a number of different venues, some officially, some not officially, just off the side. What would be extensive was working together to find ways to, you know, do the work cost effectively.
Mr. Boudreau?
Yeah.
Yes, and that's my point. This should not have come as a surprise to anyone that we, as a government and you as a department, were trying to reduce costs by bringing tender prices in line with what should have been versus what was. And I think that's the point that I want to try to make. It's not something that should have happened or people shouldn't have seen coming because of the consultations, discussions, and ongoing talks about bringing tender prices down. You know, the question that begs to be asked is why wasn't it being done cheaper? If, you know, why wasn't it being done cheaper? And it's a sort of rhetorical question here. I'm not asking you for an answer, but the question begs to be asked, why wasn't it being done cheaper? And I think that's a question that a lot of us pondered, thought about, and I think it's a question that the public of Nova Scotia have to look at as well. You know, another point that I'd like to make is that there's been a reference here about using our own equipment. If I have a piece of equipment, I think it's good business practice on my part to use that equipment to the best of its use year-round. I think it's pretty, I don't think it makes any business sense to take a piece of equipment, use it for 6 months, and then stick it somewhere and store it. There's all kinds of problems with that when you're talking about mechanical equipment. So I think it's a great initiative to take that equipment and use it year-round and use the personnel year-round, and at the same time save $2.2 million. That to me shows leadership and shows the change that we need that we have long needed in this province. You know, we have to manage our resources wisely, and we have to work with the road builders. It's been said by yourself, and I just attended a road builders conference just recently and had many conversations with those folks. We value, I think, Nova Scotians and government and your department values them. You've said that. I've said that. Others have said that. But at the same time, we have to ensure that monies are being expended wisely. Now, one of my colleagues has sort of compared, you know, the road situation in HRM and any associated costs with that to rural areas like, or Nova Scotia in general, and I'll take rural areas like Guys Rasheed Harbour and Colchester Musquodoboit Valley and Cumberland North and so on. In my estimation, that really is like comparing an apple to an orange. And the more I sit in this legislature and the more I listen to folks, I realize that many people on the opposition side have a hard time distinguishing between an apple and an orange. And I would hope that they would perhaps spend a little time looking at that. Today we're talking about rural roads and we're talking about roads in the province of Nova Scotia. My Conservative colleague has spent a lot of time talking about one particular road. I'm here to talk about roads in general, road conditions, and how we can make those roads and those road conditions better and safer and more economical for the citizens of Nova Scotia. I'm wondering if you would be so kind as to perhaps just give us an overall view of the amount of road work versus the expenditures that have happened, let's just say last year, in relation to what we would have seen maybe 3-4 years ago. I'm just wondering, you know, well, we do know that we have saved $2.2 million, and, you know, I'm looking for perhaps a little more information in that respect, and also I'm looking at sort of projected savings down the road as well. So if you could just give us a brief overview of that, that would be great. Thank you.
Ms. Fraser?
Thank you for the question. The capital spending in the province has been very significant over the last 3 years. You know, it's almost $900 million that has been invested. When you look at the impact that has, it is very significant. In 2011, 2012, we're doing $265 million worth of work. The capital budget that was released by the Minister of Finance, I believe in December, indicates a further $281 million worth of highway work that will be done in the upcoming fiscal year. That's on the capital side. As I said in my opening remarks, the RIM program has certainly put a lot of money into the maintenance of local and secondary roads and our rural roads primarily. So that's been another $179 million that's been invested. What we're doing with the money that we save from chip seal programs, from seeing more competition in the bidding, is reinvesting that money to allow us to do more work. On the 5-year capital plan that was released, you'll see the order of magnitude of the work that we're doing and the schedule that allows us to do a lot of the work. So there has been a very significant investment in the highway system, both on the capital side as well as the operating side.
Mr. Boudreau?
Okay, thank you. You just mentioned the 5-year road paving plan, and certainly that's something that is a first for the province. Mm-hmm. In my estimation, prior to coming to government, this is something that was a real deficiency, because you could never see what was going to happen in the future. You couldn't plan. Municipal units and so on often came to council, or, you know, they would bring people in transportation before council to discuss what might be happening, because they're looking at perhaps a plan, an integrated plan, municipal planning strategy, what have you. And one of the concerns they had is that it was basically year to year, almost month to month in some cases. So, as you know, right now, I'm very much a supporter of the 5-year plan. I came in looking for that kind of leadership, and this is something we have. Now, can you just talk a little bit about how that improves? I mean, I think I know how it improves, but how that improves your business, mm-hmm. and how it improves the way in which contractors can bid, which of course is important to them, because mm-hmm. one of the complaints that we always heard from contractors is it's kind of like a feast and famine approach. We can't plan. But now when things go out, I think they can plan. So I'm looking for your view on how that has improved your efficiencies and how that has helped, and it has, because I've talked to contractors, it has helped contractors in the private sector. And the point that you made and I made is that we value them. They're very important. Mm-hmm. They're an integral part of how we fix this province up. Mm-hmm. And so, I'm looking for your views on that as it relates to yourselves, the private sector, and finally, how it relates to the use of public dollars.
Ms. Fraser?
Certainly the 5-year plan from a staff and a departmental point of view is very beneficial. Really what it allows us to do is to plan and prioritize the work that we're going to do over a horizon. So it really adds certainty and allows us to start doing some pre-work sooner. So there's some great benefits there. Certainly one of the things that we've heard from the Road Builders Association is, you know, they need to understand what the work is going to be sooner. They need to understand the volume of the size of the budgets, when the work's going to come, so that they can schedule their work. So we've always had conversations with them about that. So what this has done is laid out the major capital components that we're going to be doing over the 5 years, and really has helped them with a sense of where the work's going to be so that they can plan. It allows them to make investments in the equipment that they need and in the labor forces that they need. So from that point of view, it's been very beneficial. Road builders are a very important part of the province, both from the work that we do, but just the amount of money that they inject into the economy. You know, I think in the 5-year plan, we use a number of $300 million a year in direct payroll. That's a very significant impact on the province. The other thing that I think it does is it allows people in communities to see where their roads are going to be. You know, people are very passionate about their roads and their communities, and they want to know when their issues are going to be able to be addressed. What this does is lay out the process and that we use to evaluate roads, so they can see how a road gets chosen, which is very important, but as well it allows them to see when they can expect to see work done on their road. So from a planning, from a scheduling point of view, from an efficiency point of view, it's been very, very beneficial. The specifics about how we develop the capital plan, maybe I'll ask the Chief Highway Engineer to elaborate on that a bit further.
Mr. Fissner?
I guess to answer the question, previously, before the 5-year plan, we did our planning almost on an annual basis because we were never quite sure which projects we were going to have to do. And so very frustrating for staff, because you could be designing a bridge that you thought was going this year and it didn't go this year, and so we needed to have a longer term outlook in order for us to get some of these projects ready, because there's quite extensive engineering, pre-engineering that has to happen before they can be delivered. So, you know, staff was always lobbying for this type of approach. The road building industry was as well, just so that they had a bit of stability in what was coming. And the other thing that I think Jane covered off most of the points, but the big thing here, I think, is that it's a public document. And so people now, they don't have to sort of guess what's going or what's being done. It's all put out there, and people can question us on it, why we picked the projects and this type of thing. And I've been pleased over the last few years that we've had this. I've had very few people actually come and say that projects that we have on it aren't the proper projects. There's people that may have other projects as well. There's so many to do. But I've been very happy, so it makes me feel like we're on the mark, trying to get out there and look at the needs and listen to people and see what really has to be done, and what we're picking the right projects. So that would be all I could add to Jane's answer.
Mr. Boudreau?
Yes, just sort of a comment, you know, from talking to the road builders, what they see with this type of initiative is that, and I think it's very important for road builders that are in specific geographic areas. They can actually, like one person said, we can actually look ahead now, and we can actually put in better this is what was said, we can actually put in better tender prices, because we can somehow, you know, try to connect various projects together, which enables them to keep their equipment, because every time these plants have to move, there's enormous cost, and up to this point, it's been a cost that I believe the taxpayers have been footing because of the lack of planning and the lack of, and I'm not saying this on your part, I'm saying that you were given a mandate to plan for a year, and that's what you did. That's what you were asked to do. But this type of planning has been a benefit to the road builders, according to some of the spokespersons that I've talked to. Certainly the public likes it, because now they can see. They have an opportunity to see what's happening. And I think the public in Nova Scotia for the most part, patient individuals. If they hadn't have been, they wouldn't have let the roads deteriorate to the point of 30 years. You know, you got 34, I got roads in my area that haven't been touched for a 50-year period. And the reason I believe that they lasted as long as they did is they were done by the Department of Transportation. I think they were done very, very well at that time. And one final point I want to make is I've got lots of calls, lots of emails from former employees, and yeah, I'm not going to go any further. Former employees who are so pleased to see what we're doing because they think it's going to save the taxpayers money and that it's going to improve the quality and the quantity of paving that is going to happen in the province. And I think that's something that I hope the opposition members don't lose in their single focus on certain areas. We've got to look at the big picture here. We've got to look at what we're doing, how we're accomplishing it, and how we're moving this province ahead. I'm not for staying behind. I'm all about moving ahead. And I think I can speak for my colleagues here on this side, right over here in particular, that that's what we want to do. We want to move this province ahead. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Fitzner, any comments on that?
I just want to say I appreciate your opinion about the roads being built by department force. This is why they lasted. But I just wanted to, you know, go on record to say that we're very pleased with the quality of the work that the road builders do. And we have high standards there, and that as we go forward doing some of that work ourselves, we expect them to build the quality in the same as we will, you know. And I can't speak for what happened 50 years ago or anything like that, but I just wanted to say that now. Yeah.
Well, just one final comment, Chair, if I may. I do understand, but I guess what I was trying to put across to you is I think it's the opinion of many of the people out there that this is why these roads have lasted. I understand that the road builders are, and I do appreciate what they do. I think by working together, we can improve what we do. I don't think we were there. We're getting there, and I appreciate their efforts. I appreciate your efforts. And like I said, I want to see us move ahead. And I hope that that wasn't conceived as a disparaging remark toward the road builders, because that wasn't really the intent. The intent was that we did really, I guess my point is the department did really good quality work. And I don't want that to be left out. They did really good quality work, and I'm confident they can do really good quality work in the future. Thank you.
Mr. Fitzner, any other comments?
No.
Mr. Boudreau, you have a minute left. Is there someone else who'd like to take the minute in the NDP caucus?
I'm sorry for taking.
Mr. Burchill.
Which I agree is a marvelous improvement. There's just one concern about it. I would say that in my experience, at least in the rural communities I serve, the main roads that people ask about and are seeking to know, are we on the screen, have we been lost, have we been forgotten, are not the trunks and the routes and the 100 series. They're local secondary roads. And so that one area where the 5-year plan has not been as complete a step forward as perhaps it could have been is that it hasn't included roads of that category. I'm wondering, is there any thought that we might be able to expand the scope of the 5-year plans to include this important category of roads?
Ms. Fraser.
On an annual basis, what we do is, so when we release the 2012-2013...
Order, please. Your time has expired. Sorry. Maybe you could wrap that up when you make your final comments.
Okay.
If you don't mind. The second round is going to be 15 minutes apiece, and be Mr. Younger to start.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to just start by very briefly responding to the comment by the member for Guysborough, Sheet Harbour. Certainly wasn't comparing the roads in HRM to the roads. What I compared, if the honourable member had been listening, which he clearly wasn't, was the fact that HRM and a number of rural municipalities I also pointed out, actually sat down with the road builders associations and had meetings and said, listen, we need to get the price down to here. How are we going to do it? And if we don't, we're going to look at our own options, including at many of those municipalities, taking it in-house. That discussion, that specific discussion never happened. And even in the comments here, it's like, well, we had ongoing discussion and so forth. And the comment was that other jurisdictions did it and achieved those savings without moving to an in-house system. And I would point out that I mentioned not only HRM just because they're obviously the second biggest road tender in the province, but I mentioned a number of other municipalities. Mr. Chair, you know, there's a number of, you know, it strikes me that, you know, we talk about tendering, and I actually find the comment that the province is competing with the private sector and offering competition somewhat offensive, because of course they're not competing tender to tender, and we now know that in fact if the province was competing tender to tender, the province would be doing it for $49,000, the private sector would be bidding $40,000, and the province would lose all the tenders and wouldn't be doing any of the work. So they're not competing, and even if they were, they're competing with the tax dollars of the road builders. So they're using the road builders and other Nova Scotians' own tax dollars to compete against them. We know that many of the road builders, they hire obviously employees in the summer on many of their employees on a part-time basis, or I guess full-time when they're doing work, but on a project-by-project basis. And we know from a number of them that they have actually reduced employment hours as a result, which is understandable. They're doing less work. And they're doing less work in the private sector bidding because some work is scaled back. And they're also doing less work for the province because there's 300 kilometers, give or take, that is now being done by the province. We don't know how many people have fewer hours. So how many people living in rural or anywhere in Nova Scotia now have fewer hours and are paying fewer tax dollars because the province has taken that in-house? We don't know the cost of that. We know, and this is something that I would actually like to get your response to, because a number of our members have been contacted by department employees at some of the local shops to say that RIM funding in their areas has been reduced, and that there is less work being done in rural communities across Nova Scotia by employees of the department using RIM funding. And I guess I would like to get your response to that, because certainly the impression of the departmental employees contacting our members is that this is not a good thing and will result in issues down the road in terms of long-term maintenance.
Ms. Fraser?
The RIM funding, when it was originally established in 2000-2001, was a $9 million program. And then it was increased to $10 million. There was a commitment made, I think, in 2004-2005 to double the amount of RIM funding from $10 million to $20 million. That was done, and there was $20 million worth of work done in RIM over a number of years. So in 2010-2011, the budget for RIM was $20 million. The budget number in 2011-2012 is $15 million for RIM funding. There has been a significant investment in capital work in the province over the last number of years, as I've said and has been said a number of times. It's almost $900 million over 3 years. So there has been a significant investment in the highway system. The RIM program, when it was initially brought in, really the focus is to be on those smaller projects that aren't large enough to be part of the capital plan. And when we look at it, it's a mixture of projects that we put out to tender in an attempt to keep private contractors working all across the province, as well as in-house. And there's some things that our crews, it's simply more efficient and more effective for the in-house crews to do work, and some things it's more effective to put out to private contractors. Things like guardrail, timber guardrail, things of that nature, we can't compete with the price of a private contractor. So that's really the way that the decision gets gets made on what work goes to private as well as what work gets done in-house.
Mr. Younger?
Well, I appreciate your candidness that you can't compete with the private sector on things like guardrails and that. It's pretty apparent you can't compete with them on the double chip sealing either, since you're $9,000 a kilometer higher by your own numbers. I appreciate you saying, so 2010, 2011, there was $20 million in RIM funding. It went down last year to $15 million, and I'm going to table this document, and I'm just wondering whether it's accurate, because I have a document here which I'll table actually for the 2010, or which, well, it says 2010, but I think that funding was expended in 2011, 2012, which does say about 15 million. So I think that's the one you're referring to. But I have one for the coming year, which would suggest that there's only $3.3 million being expended. And I'm just wondering whether that is accurate or what that number is expected to be. And I'll table that one as well. Because if it's accurate, that would be 20 million to 15 down to 3.3 and change. So I'm wondering whether that's accurate, or whether that's just we don't have a complete list at this point.
Ms. Fraser?
There's no decision to change the RIM funding down to 3.3 million. I'll have a look at the document. The RIM funding, as I said, went from 20 million in 10-11 down to 15 in 11-12. So that's where that decrease was. You know, it's no secret that that this government is very committed to getting back to balance by 13-14, and every department has been asked to make reductions in their budget as a way to meet that target. The reduction in RIM in the current fiscal year was one area, based on the investments that had been made in the capital program and other work that was done, where we felt that it would have a minimal impact on services for Nova Scotians. So that's the rationale for the reduction.
Mr. Younger?
Thank you. You talk about, and I appreciate, I mean, I know you probably can't respond to that right now, so we can always get a response in writing at some other time. But you just mentioned about having to reduce costs in the department. Obviously, you mentioned RIM was reduced slightly, well, I guess not slightly, it's by 25% from 20 to 15 million. What other things are going to be, are you looking at to reduce in the department or to cut back on?
In the 2011-2000 budget that was tabled in April of the previous year, the department's budget actually increased. Our operating budget all across the department is $420 million, which is a significant amount of money. I don't have the estimate book in front of me, so I'm going to go by memory, but there were some areas that were decreased in highways and bridges. The snow and ice budget stayed the same as the previous year, so there was no decrease in that area. We focus, as all departments do, on administrative areas. Are there places that we can look across the department to make sure that we can reduce savings on the areas that aren't critical to the delivery of services to Nova Scotians?
Mr. Younger?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, I appreciate that. I only asked that because you had raised the issue of cost savings, and I just wanted to see if there was something different that was sort of on the horizon we weren't aware of, understanding that you're not going to tell us what might be coming in the upcoming budget. I want to get back to this chip sealing plant, because if there are things that have been said that sound terribly contradictory to me. We wanted to reduce the costs, but now the private sector cost, and nobody reduced it down to what they were paying in New Brunswick, which was sort of that, look at the prices they're getting in New Brunswick, and if they were 37, and the province is doing it for 49, and the private sector is doing it for 40, we're still not at 37. What is your department doing to since the department went down this path in an effort to reduce costs because the private sector they felt was too high, and now the government cost is almost 25% higher than the private sector per kilometer. what is your department doing to reduce your cost down to what the private sector is delivering it for?
Ms. Fraser?
That's a good question.
Thank you.
You know, I mean, we've already discussed about the fact that this was a learning year, so obviously the per kilometer cost is going to be higher. Our objective is to obviously and to always work more efficiently, more effectively. So it's going to be to look at the way that the crews are working. There's a lot of work in being trained in the application of chip seal. So, you know, can we improve the time, less downtime, things of that nature as we move forward. But certainly, I mean, that would be a question that we would be asking our crews. And it's a question that we ask all the time. As you know, I've spoken about the centerline paint, which is the same sort of mix of private and public. And it's always that competitive tension works both ways. So it's good for private industry to understand our price point and how we can deliver a service and at what cost. But it's also very, very good for our crews to see what the private industry is doing and try to, you know, to be as competitive as they can be. Our crews, the people that work for the department, take great pride in the work that they do. They work very hard for Nova Scotians. They do have a good eye on the taxpayers' dollars. So, you know, I think that there will be some positive competitive tension for us as well. And, you know, who knows, maybe we can reduce those prices even further so that we can reinvest more savings into more road work.
Mr. Younger?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I only have a couple of minutes, so I'm a little bit all over the place just to get the last couple things in. You had mentioned, and the member for Guysborough Sheet Harbour had mentioned using the winter equipment in the summer. I had also addressed the fact that obviously I think we all recognize that reduces the lifespan of the equipment or increases the maintenance one side or the other because it gets higher use. It's no different than driving a car more kilometers. Have you calculated what the reduced lifespan or increased cost for that equipment is going to be?
Mr. Fitzner?
As we mentioned before, we have to gear up our equipment to handle the winter season, right? And so the amount of gear that we need in the winter is much more than what we actually can use in the summertime, so we do have a bit of a surplus, right? What we find in actual fact is the type of work that is done in the winter, plowing with salt and that type of thing, that is the activity that really reduces the lifespan of the equipment, and that the, you know, hauling gravel and that type of thing in the summertime is much less damaging to the equipment. Now, grant you, there will be, you know, use and parts start to wear out and that type of thing, but it's not significant. Actually, it's sometimes better to have the trucks working than to have them sit, because when they sit, parts start to seize up. It's out in the yard for a month and you go to use it, and then all of a sudden you have problems with the brakes and that type of thing. So it's good practice to keep the equipment moving as much as you can as a part of a maintenance theory, but we haven't sort of actually calculated the additional costs for the summer season alone. We capture all our costs year-round on each piece of equipment has its own account, and anything that's done to the equipment is charged to that account, and so we're able to come up with an hourly rate for the equipment. So the more work you do, the more you can spread those costs over and you lower your hourly rates go, right? But I don't know if that's answered your question correctly or not.
Well, I don't dispute that the winter would be the harder with the salt and everything else. I don't doubt that at all. But I think, as you pointed out, there are, and I also don't dispute that your per hour cost may go down, but your total cost, and I think the lifespan from on average will probably be shortened because you're getting higher kilometers. As you said, you're wearing out the belts. Listen, I'm not a mechanic, but you use that's hard use.
Order. Sorry, your time has expired. Mr. D'Entremont, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and just a couple of comments on some things that I heard, especially from the member from Guysborough Sheet Harbour. You know, we do understand the difference between apples and oranges. The oranges happen to be either members of the caucus or the members of cabinet. The apples are, of course, everybody else that doesn't agree with this government. Mr. Mr. Chair, I can also say that I think the member for Guysborough Street Harbour should feel himself lucky that he didn't get his road chip sealed, but he did get it paved. So, you know, I just wonder how that all worked. So, back to my questioning, and this revolves a little bit around the Monte Vista Road, which is one of the very few roads that this paving crew, chip seal crew, was able to get done. So it's the example, of course, that we had, and it did bring more light to the political side of things. So my questions are revolving around how often did Mr. McDonnell himself, his EA, his CA, email, write, phone, text, or otherwise communicate with the department on the project?
Ms. Fraser?
One of the factors that go into the decision on which roads to do is around information that we get from the public, information that we receive from MLAs throughout the province. MLAs are very close to their constituents. They know the condition of the roads. They understand what the issues are. It's not uncommon for an MLA to meet with our area managers to discuss the condition of roads, and often what we find is that the list that the area manager has for roads that need to be upgraded or repaired often matches what the MLA has. So input from the public is one thing one factor that's part of the decision-making framework, as well as the volume of traffic on the roads, how many people live there, density, and obviously the condition of the road. So input from the public and MLAs is certainly just one factor that goes into the decision matrix in deciding which roads get done.
Mr. D'Entremont?
Thank you very much. And no, being an MLA for almost 9 years now, I appreciate the frank discussions that I can have with the department about roads that are in my constituency, roads that are near my constituency. But I can tell you, I've never actually talked about the road that goes across the front of my house. As a matter of fact, I have talked actually counter to that, making sure that my road is the last road to get paved in the whole constituency, so I know the job got done. That my road is the last road to get graded because I know the rest of the constituency got done. I mean, that's what I think as an MLA we should be doing. And this problem that we see here in this Monte Vista Road issue is that there was a lot of go-between on this specific road. How much did Mr. McDonnell's phone calls and other pressure tactics influence your decision to spend more money on the Monte Vista Road?
As I said, the decision to what roads get done include a number of factors, and the information that we have in the decision-making factor on volume, density, things of that nature results in the prioritization of the roads. So that's how a road gets on the list and gets prioritized. With the chip seal crew, what we were doing because of the cost of mobilizing and demobilizing the plant and the learning curve, we went to a central area intended to work around that area. The decision on what projects get done are put forward by based on information from area managers, from district directors, and then there's that decision is the way that it gets done based on a number of factors that I've said. I don't know if the chief highway engineer has anything to add to the specific process that we follow on a consistent basis in the determining of the prioritization of roads.
Just, you know, I'd say, as you know, we get lists of suggested road priorities from all across the province, from all members on an annual basis, and I guess what we tell them is that we thank them for their input, you know, and that we will have those roads rated and prioritized and considered for potential work. And so in this particular case, that's the process that was followed. That was one of a number of projects that would have been on a list that was submitted, and we had rated it. And as Jane mentioned, we were planning to do initially our work centrally. It turned out to be a good candidate for the chip seal project. So the decision is simply made by staff. We then would put together a program for the summer based on that type of rationale. when we don't consider or even know or want to know who lives on the roads. It's just, we just look at the road itself. We put together a package, and then we would bring that package to the minister to sign off, but the minister wouldn't sign off on individual projects. It would just be, he would sign off on the program. So that's what happened in this case, and that was among the projects that was in the program.
One of the many emails that we have in our package, and I'm going to go to page 76. On September 9th, Peter Hackett emailed Gerard Joseph Lee asking for an update on chip sealing on the Monte Vista Road. He's getting, in quotes, getting calls from the MLA. My quick question on this one, who's Mr. Lee?
Mr. Lee would be Gerard Lee, and he's our manager of operations, maintenance operations.
Okay. On August 19, in the email exchange between Mr. Hackett, Mr. Lee, and Paul Mayet, Mr. Hackett explains that he has some concerns about the weather and getting the work done a bit late in the year. And his quote, if the weather does not cooperate, will we carry over until the spring? The reason I'm asking is the MLA for the area will be looking for some answer. Who's Mr. Mayat? Or Mr.
He
Mallet?
would be the supervisor of the chip seal crew.
Okay. In an August 26 exchange between Mr. Hackett and Mr. Lee, that's page 78, Mr. Lee says he's getting calls about Monte Vista and asks for an update. Later he asks any way we can do Monte Vista first. It appears in these emails that Mr. McDonnell, the local MLA, exerted considerable pressure on the department staff to get Monte Vista, Renfrew Road, Grand Lake Road, whatever you want to call it, the road at which he lives, finished. And it appears from the emails that, of course, his tactics worked because he did get it done. Mr. Chair, in fact, in a recent media article, he indicates that now that his party is in government, he had more influence, saying, and I quote, and I'll provide this as well, he said, it hasn't been easy since it has been in opposition and until the NDP was elected in 2009. Now he's trying to play catch up to get his constituent roads paved. So again, to my first question, is it usual for department staff to rearrange work schedules in order to appease a particularly vocal MLA who's determined to use his position to play catch up?
Mr. Fissner?
You know, we often get requests from members of all parties about a particular project and whether it's going to be done this year, or when it's going to be done, or when it's going to be tendered. So it wouldn't be uncommon for those kind of conversations to be held. But
yes.
The member is making reference.
He's not. Here you go.
Sorry?
Yes. Go ahead, Mr. Barr. Just 1 second. Your mic's not on. Mr. Barr.
The member is making reference to a document that is not being tabled that we don't have any access to. I believe that is out of order.
Yes, it is, and I would ask the member to table the documents right away.
The whole document. Would that not be
No,
taken out of context?
No. If he quotes from the document, it should just be the documents that the actual ones he quotes from. Thank you. And in the future, I was going to talk about this after we've wrapped up the meeting today, but in the future, anyone's going to quote from any document in here, you have to bring copies for every single member of the committee, the chair, and the guests as well as the clerk. And if anyone doesn't do that in the future, I'll rule them out of order. Okay? That's Mr. Dantemont.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and I apologize for that. I thought I had packages when I came in here, and I didn't. So I'll be tabling these as I go along, and for next time, I'll make sure that happens. So I'm just going to keep on going here. By September 27, the Deputy Minister was involved, sending an email to Mr. Lee asking for an update on the Monte Vista chip seal project. In fact, it was one of the several emails in which the Deputy Minister seemed to take a special interest in the project. For instance, on October 7th, he said he must go out and lend a hand, he says. In that same day, in an email to the Minister's Secretary with the Minister's EA and Mr. Fitzner copied, the deputy says he wants to take the Minister out to look at chip sealing operations while on the Monte Vista Road. My question: Monte Vista Road was not the first road chip sealed by the in-house crew, by far. Why do you suppose the deputy took a special interest in this project and wanted the Minister to see it as well, if it wasn't because Mr. McDonnell was pressuring the Minister?
Ms. Fraser? Ms. Fraser, that was directed to Deputy, I believe.
Certainly. It's not uncommon for the minister to do site visits across the province. He's very engaged in going to the bases to see the work that our crews do, and he's very supportive of departmental staff. So it certainly isn't uncommon for the minister to go out and to look at the operations, if you will. And also, the former deputy was also very, very interested and very supportive of staff. So that's in answer to your first question. Monte Vista Road, I can assume, is probably because it was a short drive and would probably be very close to the area in which they're going. The process that's used to evaluate roads and to determine which ones get done, it is a decision-making matrix. It is based on evidence, and it's based on a number of factors, as I've said. Input from the community is certainly very, very important, as well as, and one of the vehicles that we use to do that is often through MLAs. It's not uncommon for MLAs to come in. As well as that, it's certainly not uncommon for an MLA to ask about a specific project. As far as staff being aware of who lives on what roads, we don't have that information, and it wouldn't really factor into the decisions that we would be making. It would be based on prioritization, and then once again, depending on where the crew is, often it makes more sense to do a road that, because of where it's located geographically, to do that road maybe a little bit ahead of schedule, as opposed to moving the crew and the equipment outside of the area in order to do in a perfect list. So those are some of the factors that go into that.
Mr. D'Entremont.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I know I'm going to run out of time here for my questions, so I'm just wondering, once I'm done, I've got a whole bunch of questions that I'd like to have tabled and maybe answered by the department. It would be okay to table those once I'm done, when I know where I end up.
Yes, it would be.
Okay, thank you. And Bruce, I'm going to have to pick on you just a little bit here, because I know the deputy is just acting, and she probably wasn't around when this was happening. So we talked about the barbecue, the famous barbecue that happened on the Monte Vista Road. So I'm just wondering, Mr. Fitzner, if you attended the barbecue on the Monte Vista Road that day.
No, I didn't attend. Actually, I had heard prior to that that they had mentioned to me that the residents out there wanted to have a barbecue. And what I had actually told them at the time is tell them no, that we certainly appreciate their support for the crew, but that I didn't feel it was really appropriate for them to have a barbecue. It was on a weekend when they finished up, and it happened, and that was it. But no, I certainly wasn't there, and that's what happened there. It wouldn't be our normal course of thing for that to happen. Yeah.
Well, it's just sort of the issue that on October 27th, that the minister, Minister Esther Brooks at the time, told reporters, and I quote, I was on it last week, and it was located out in Hants County at the time. We received well-received project. The local community was hosting a barbecue for the workers because of the great job that they had done. So I'm just wondering if it was a regular occurrence to have barbecues, and I think you've answered that one. I know, again, I have a lot. How much more time do I have here?
You have less than 1 minute.
Okay, well, less than 1 minute. I'll just table what I have left here. And, the ultimate part that we have here is that, we look at this as being, I think, a colossal failure, that we didn't get the mileage out of the chip sealing plant. I think anyone that expected how it was sold to the public, how the department came and tried to sell it to the caucus offices. I hope that next year, as we continue around this experiment, that it does have much better result than it does, and then I hope that maybe government, more particularly the leaders, have realized that the politics of paving is still very, very alive and well within this government.
Please. Order. Mr. D'Entremont, your time has expired. Mr. Burrell.
Just still thinking about the double chip seal program, I would say that the program has been received in a very welcome way in the communities I serve, but that the program would have a natural challenge given that it has to confront a kind of great pent-up demand, that there's so many years of good candidate roads for double chip sealing or servicing of some kind when this demand hasn't been being addressed, that the list of qualifiable roads would far exceed the first pass that the department would be able to make. So a great deal would depend about on the quality of the criteria for making these decisions. And you've spoken about a decision-making matrix and about the role of community input, political input, and so on. But I wonder if you could just characterize some of the other main elements in the decision-making matrix that got us to the decision of the dozens of roads that were brought forward in each part of the province to get us down to the 4 or 5 in each region that are on the to be proceeded with list.
Mr. Fitzner?
Okay, when we developed the sort of the low volume road stabilization program, we wanted to make sure that we had some sort of criteria that we can do it objectively. So in the past, when you get to low volume roads, we tended to use traffic volumes as the proxy for the use of the road. What people have told us over the years is that doesn't capture the total story of that road. There could be a community center on that road, a baseball field, a cemetery, a church, a small business, and this type of thing. So they felt that you needed to factor that in as well. So we came up with what we called a sort of a density factor. So we would go out on a road. First of all, we would take a traffic count because that is a relevant factor. But we would also go out. We counted every home that was on the road, any businesses, any sports facilities, anything basically. And there's a weighted factor for each of those things. A business with 2 employees would have less weight than one with 20 employees, etc. We would then we balanced then the traffic volume 50% weighting, the roadside development density at 50% weighting, and came up with a combined factor that would basically be between 0 and 100. And so we determined that if a road fell below 50, it should be basically a gravel road, that it doesn't have enough traffic or development to sort of get a higher level surface. If it was between 50 and 70 or 80, we could start to look at black gravel treatments, chip seal treatments, and this type of thing. And if it ever made it up to 100%, it could actually be triggered to have it paved. So it would meet paving thresholds. So we went out in the last year and did the traffic counts, the density counts, the residences, and put them all into this matrix. And it then would spit out a list, in relative priority, and some of them would just be, no, this is just going to be a gravel road. It is not going to get a different surface than that. The ones that were in the higher range, we then went out, sent staff out to look at each of the roads and say, okay, on paper it looks good. What does it look like in the field? They would go out and look at that road and say, maybe there's too much truck traffic on this road. The chip seal wouldn't be a good option here, or there's some other issues. There's not enough strength in the road. It's going to all break up. And so after that process was complete, we'd come back again, go back down the list, and we'd say, okay, this one, basically pick them, start from the top down and rule out ones that weren't good candidates. So that's the process.
Thanks. I'm thinking about, because of the huge pent-up demand, the volume of nominated roads, the number of roads that would have scored over 50, which were not in the list of things to be proceeded with last year and this. I'm wondering what you can say, looking into the medium term for this program, about what those communities and residents of those roads might be able to expect. How long down the road would it be before another process of prioritizing and going through this decision-making matrix and so on we might look to having be brought forward?
I guess it's always a factor of available funding, right? And so we have 9,000 kilometers of gravel roads in the province. We did 40 last year, right? And that wasn't a great year, but at least 40 got done. And we probably paved. We have about just 15 to 16,000 kilometers of paved roads, and we may have done 650, which was some of the biggest budgets that we've ever seen for capital in the department. So I guess the scale of the need is still far in excess of the ability to fund it. So I guess the only thing we can do is ask people to be patient, and we'll continue to try to maintain the road to a good usable surface in the interim. And we'll try to do it on a fair and objective basis, the ones that we do pick. And so we hope to see more than 40, obviously, this year, right? That was like one thing I just wanted to mention, that when this crew started this year, what I told them was, the productivity is very important, but for the first year, I want you to focus on the quality. You're a new crew, you're just new at this. I don't expect you to do miracles the first year. Make sure you're doing the work right, and when we're doing it right, then we'll work on the speed, and I'm sure we'll see this year much more productivity than we had last year.
Mr. Burrell.
Thanks. Could we go back to where we left off about the 5-year plan? I was wondering about what plans the department might have that residents of local secondary roads might be able to see themselves reflected in this kind of planning in a way that they haven't been in the first iteration of the 5-year plan.
Ms. Fraser.
Thank you. In the 5-year capital plan, what we do is when the plan for 2012-2013 comes out, we will have a list of the local roads that we're planning to do in that year. So there'll be a number of those roads that are in and the schedule for the upcoming construction year. And we plan to do that every year as it gets released. So those would be the larger projects that would be capital in nature, and residents and communities can expect to see their names, their roads indicated there. On the projects that are a bit smaller, that aren't always in capital in nature, there's a number of those projects, so we don't tend to put those out because it is they tend to be much smaller, and we do a number of them, so it's very difficult to put that list out. We have talked about, does it make sense to put local roads out longer in the 5-year capital plan? The reason why we don't is for a number of factors. One is the volume of the roads that we will be doing. There's a number of them, but as well, conditions on roads, on local roads, change quite rapidly over a 5-year period. So, we could identify a road that is targeted to be double chip sealed or paved or something in year 4 for a local road, but the situation or the condition deteriorates so that it would have to be brought forward, or other ones would drop off. So it's just not seen as an effective way to manage the road system, but we will do it on an annual basis.
Mr. Burrell.
Well, it would seem to be a great improvement, because I'm sure many MLAs would have had conversations with unhappy people after the publication of the first report, not seeing the road there, and needed to explain your category of road is neither on nor not on. So so you're saying that henceforward the 5-year plan will include 1-year plans for this category?
Ms. Fraser?
Yeah.
For the current year.
Yeah.
And I think one of the benefits as well of the 5-year plan is that it lays out the decision-making framework and the criteria that's used, so people can understand how a road gets on the list, and all the factors that go into determining that. So it's very much a process. It's very much driven on evidence and on the conditions and the needs.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Burrell. Mr. Segar.
Thank you. Just kind of moving back to the barbecue for a second. The people of Northport are going to have a festival on August 11th to celebrate their bridge, and you guys are going to be invited along with the minister on that one. Took a little longer than we'd hoped, but it's done now, and we're happy with that. I understand from earlier conversations, getting back to the chip seal part, that other jurisdictions, other provinces have their own capacity to do that as well. Which ones? And I understand New Brunswick is one of them?
Ms. Fraser?
Yes, New Brunswick is really the model that we looked at because they're very close to us. As it has been pointed out, often on the larger capital projects, we see competition traveling back and forth across the borders. So we look to New Brunswick as a model to see what the prices were that they were receiving, as well as the way that they do their business. So we had quite a discussion and a dialogue with the province of New Brunswick.
Mr. Governor.
So in fact, you looked around and found the best practice, which included capacity within your department for this function, for chip sealing, and as a consequence took this action to do that with all due diligence, talking to all concerned, and that's what happened.
Ms. Fraser?
Yes, it was a very deliberate approach. It was based on the experience that we had been seeing in 2008 and 2009 with limited competition, with only 2 contractors bidding. The price per kilometer that we were seeing, we felt that we could certainly do it for less than that amount, and that's been proven. And it was to get a sense of the types of things that we should factor in, some of the experiences that New Brunswick saw. And I mean, certainly the chief highway engineer can go into the specifics of the actions that we took in leading up to that decision, if you think it would be helpful.
Okay, thank you. Now, I understand that in the first year, it costs roughly $49,000 per kilometer double chip seal, and we are kind of at least thinking that this is going to be brought down by a fair measure now that the crew is trained and the plant is operational. Do you have any idea how much closer we might get to the private sector cost?
Ms. Fraser?
You know, certainly it would be our objective to close that gap as much as possible. We've been very fortunate in seeing the reduce in tender price. You know, as we've discussed today, there was a learning curve involved in this. Weather does play a factor in the amount of work that we get done. Our objective would be, as the chief highway engineer pointed out, our focus this year was on quality, as it always will be. But we're hoping now that we understand the way that the crews understand how the equipment works. We have a good process to lay the double chip seal, and we're getting good quality. Our focus now is going to be on improving the efficiency of the crews and on the productivity. So, you know, we're working to close that gap, and I'm sure the employees in the department. There's nothing wrong with a little competition. They're very motivated to deliver a quality service for Nova Scotians.
Mr. Guerra?
I'm sure that they are, and I'm sure that they will. In reference to the asphalt, what does it cost for a kilometer of paving or asphalt?
Ms. Fraser?
Currently, to do it, depending on whether it's a 100 series highway, but it's costing about $300,000 per kilometer to lay asphalt.
Mr. Guerra?
Is that similar to the cost in New Brunswick? And are we expecting any kind of mitigation of that cost once we have our asphalt plant in operation?
Ms. Fraser?
What we were seeing with the with asphalt placement, and the reason why we've purchased the asphalt plant is in certain pockets in the province there's limited competition, and those areas tend to be higher than what we're seeing in the rest of the province. So there's about 12 contractors that can bid on asphalt work. In certain areas we're getting good competition, and we're seeing competitive pricing. There's pockets around, I think it's from Kings down around to Queens, some areas of Guysborough, as well as Richmond and Inverness, where it's not as competitive. That's where the asphalt plant will be. Some of the things that we're doing.
Order, please. Unfortunately, our time has expired for questioning today. I'd ask the department if there are any comments they want to make to wrap up before you go and before we get on with other committee business. Ms. Fraser?
I would like to thank the MLAs for their questions and the interest that that they have shown in the initiatives that the department is undertaking. There is some information that we've committed to get back to you with, and we will certainly do that as soon as possible. So thank you.
Yes, as regards to the information, and if I leave anything out, I'd ask the clerk to correct me on this. Mr. D'Entremont requested the number of people in the chip seal crew and a detailed costing of what they make and breakdown of all the costs around that. Also asked for detailed costs on the preparation work that was needed for the chip seal plant. All the labor and all the materials and everything went into that. Cost of the consultant and a copy of the standing offer of the consultant that you use in these matters. And you also spoke about an identity factor when deciding what roads would be paved, and I wonder if you could supply a copy of that criteria as well. And Mr. D'Entremont has tabled questions here, which I will make available to the department and to all members of the committee. And with that, we have some, yeah, so what's the other one? Mr. Younger?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I tabled the RIM funding chart, and we're just going to get a response because I think the deputy indicated that it's probably not accurate.
That's correct. So if you could give us a written response on that as well, I would appreciate it. Okay, now down to committee business. And we're going to meet at 12:30 for subcommittee today to set agenda. 11:30? 11:30, sorry about that. Rushing things along here, or not rushing fast enough. And also you'll notice that the caucus has received the information requested from the Department of Health way back in October 26, 2011 regarding the Colchester Regional Hospital. That's been sent to each caucus. And just a couple of comments I'd like to make, and I'd like to also thank the department for coming today and your straightforward answers to some interesting questions. So thank you very much for coming. And also, I want to state that in the future, if somebody doesn't table their items that they're quoting from, the complete document, I will rule them out of order. And that has to be tabled with every member, have to have a copy for every member of each caucus that's here, the chair, the clerk, and also the guests. And that's it. With that, our next meeting is February 22nd, and it's going to be the Office of Immigration. And with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Accept it. We're adjourned.